fairly impressive. Okay, that's a little bit of a red flag. I stand corrected. My name is Levi Browdy. I'm the Executive Director for the Falun Dafa Information Center. I'm also the father of 2 Shen Yun dancers. Today, we'll walk through a recent People magazine article about Shen Yun, an American company facing an unprecedented attack by Beijing to sabotage its operations and destroy its reputation, right here on U.S. soil. Hello, folks. For the past few days, I've noticed that when you search for Shen Yun online and go to the News tab, an article from People.com has raised to the top, and it's been there. And so I guess this means this article is pretty popular. People are reading it. And so my nonprofit, the Falun Dafa Information Center, has done multiple studies of the transnational repression by Beijing targeting the Falun Gong diaspora, the Buddhist-based spiritual practice Falun Gong, and companies and entities that they have started, like Shen Yun Performing Arts. And so what I'd like to do, since this article appears to be popular, is today I'm going to dive into this article. We're going to go line by line and see how it stands up to scrutiny. I did a similar video like this in the past with the latest edition of the New York Times coverage of Shen Yun. I'll include a link to that below so you can go through that. But today, let's dive into the People.com article on Shen Yun. I can't remember the last time I read People magazine, probably never. I'm not really that interested in the Kardashians or the sexiest man alive or whatever stuff they cover. It's not exactly a juggernaut of investigative journalism, but I'll keep an open mind. Who knows? They might surprise us. So let's dive in and see what this article is about and see if it stands up to scrutiny. Okay. What is going on with Shen Yun? All about the controversy surrounding the Chinese dance group. Okay, pretty straightforward. The controversy thing, I mean, it seems these days if anybody just slings mud at you, suddenly you're controversial. But I guess that's where we are, so let's go with it. The Chinese dance group was which was founded in 2006, that's true, is affiliated with the Falun Gong religion. Well, not as precise as you could be. People of the Falun Gong faith founded Shen Yun, and they operate the company. So that's the affiliation, I guess, that they're talking about. All right. First paragraph. There's more than what meets the eye when it comes to the Shen Yun Performing Arts Group. Okay, that's probably true of almost anything or anyone. Founded in 2006, the dance group advertises itself as a celebration of China's culture and heritage that brings performers from all over the world to train in New York before touring globally. Okay, yes, it was founded in 2006. The dance group advertises itself as a celebration of Chinese culture and heritage. That suggests that this reporter maybe didn't see the show, maybe haven't talked to people who've seen the show, maybe didn't do a lot of research, and they're just sort of going off the Shen Yun advertisements. That's a little disappointing. Maybe that will change further down in the article. This part about brings performers from all over the world to train in New York. Well, I mean, you know, Shen Yun, its headquarters, the campus that it has, there is also an elite academy and college that shares the same campus, and a lot of the Shen Yun performers are trained in that academy and college. And like any elite academy around the world, it attracts people from around the world. So indeed, people from around the world are in those schools and are being trained, and if they get good enough, they can tour with Shen Yun. But it doesn't, I mean, this idea that it goes out and brings performers, that's not quite the right concept. It's sort of like, I guess, those elite tennis academies down in Florida or perhaps an Olympic gymnastic training center. Obviously, that would bring and attract talent from around the world, and the same is true for Shen Yun. So I'm not sure about this brings performers. Okay. While Shen Yun appears graceful and colorful on the prolific amount of billboards and advertisements posted around the world, true, some former performers have accused the dance group of an abusive environment behind the scenes. All right, well, they're probably alluding to the series of articles that the New York Times has recently published targeting Shen Yun, which has a load of problems. Again, I did a deep dive into the latest New York Times article, and I'll include that in a link down below. You can read more about that. In response to some of the accusations that surfaced in November 2024, they didn't surface in November, they surfaced in August. That was when the first New York Times article was published, so I guess they got their month wrong there. Shen Yun's representatives released a statement maintaining that students' participation is fully voluntary. Okay, so that's true. Quote, "Sure, some people leave because it's not for them, and that's perfectly fine." The statement read, per the New York Times. Okay, that's a little bit of a red flag. Why are you getting a statement from Shen Yun through the New York Times? Why don't you just go to Shen Yun's website, and all their press statements are there, and a lot more information about the company is there. That leads me to believe that this journalist might just be looking at the New York Times and doing their own article based on that, which would be very disappointing. Hopefully there's some original journalism here. Hopefully they're going to other sources, direct sources, third-party sources, and not just reading the New York Times. We'll see. Quote, "But the vast majority of students will tell you this is their dream come true, and the parents rave about the positive changes in their children." End quote. I'm sure that quote is true. I haven't checked the Shen statements. It certainly rings true for me. I have 2 adult sons who've been touring with Shen Yun for about 5 years now, and been in the training schools I referenced earlier, even longer. And it has been amazing. They came to the school as sort of chubby baseball players, and it has just really been transformative in terms of their work ethic, their sense of humor, their ability to take things lightly but also seriously. I mean, it's been wonderful. So I would certainly back that statement that the parents rave about the positive changes in their children. They even do the dishes more often than they used to. So kudos to Shen Yun for that. Okay. So, what are the allegations being leveled against Shen Yun? Here's everything to know. Everything. Okay. Here's everything to know about the controversial dance group and the accusations made against them, including what Shen Yun performers and employees have said in response. Okay, so that's a big promise to your readers. Everything to know about the dance group. Shen Yun is a performing arts company that's been in operation for 18 years. Every year they put on a brand new show. Every show is a showcase of authentic Chinese culture that spans 5,000 years. Stories of Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, stories from the great works of Chinese literature, great works of poetry, the modern China, people standing up to the tyranny, the CCP. All of this is on the stage for a Shen Yun show, and it changes every year. And it's an American company founded mostly by first-generation immigrants without any government help, any corporate help. They came here with almost nothing. They had their work ethic, their faith, and their artistic sensibility, and they built just on their hard work and effort. They built what has become the fastest growing performing arts company in American history. That's just some of the storylines you could be talking about when you're going to cover Shen Yun. So the fact that they're promising their reader that they're going to know everything to know about the dance group, well, who knows? Again, maybe People magazine will surprise us. Let's find out. What is Shen Yun? Okay. Shen Yun is a classical Chinese dance company that focuses on bringing to life a lost culture through beautiful art per the group's website. Okay, that sounds true. With vibrant costumes and backdrops, the performances tell a story of the beauty and goodness of China before communism per their website. But the group is more than just an entertaining performance. Spiritual leader and the founder of Falun Gong, a religious movement, Li Hongzhi, co-created the show to help amplify the beliefs of the religion. Okay, not entirely true. I think that's a little misleading. Li Hongzhi, the founder of Falun Gong, many other Falun Gong practitioners did help found, and they are sort of the creative genius behind the Shen Yun performance. That's true. I don't think anyone there would say that the show is merely to amplify the beliefs of the religion. It really is to showcase authentic Chinese culture to the world, the culture that was almost destroyed by the communist regime. Now, I will say, if you know a little bit about Falun Gong is a Buddhist-based spiritual practice with roots in China, and its roots actually go back thousands of years, although it was only made public in 1992. And people who practice Falun Gong, I think, are uniquely qualified to articulate and represent and showcase authentic Chinese culture to the world, because its spirituality is very much It's hard to separate authentic Chinese culture from the spiritual traditions that arise from it, Buddhism, Taoism, and certainly Falun Gong. They very much are highly qualified ambassadors of traditional Chinese culture, and that's really the purpose of the show. Certainly the beliefs of Falun Gong do come through on the show, just as does, ideas of Buddhism, Taoism, and other things. But although the dance group is registered as a nonprofit organization, it has become a moneymaker for Falun Gong, per the Daily. Okay, so again, they're a third source, but still seems like they're reading news and writing a news article about it, which also shared that tax records show that the group has $266 million in assets and makes well over $10 million a year in ticket sales. Okay, so I'll assume all that's true. I don't know how much money Shen Yun makes or what their assets are. But they seem to set it up like a nonprofit doesn't make that much money. I mean, look, the Metropolitan Opera in New York, Lincoln Center, Kennedy Center, all these places are nonprofit. All these places make way more than Shen Yun does a year, 10 million. I'm sure it's 20 or 30 million or what have you. And those are all nonprofits. So the definition of a nonprofit is not directly related to whether you can make money or not. And I think that's the implication of this paragraph. I don't know if that was just the ignorance of the author or what have you, but those were unrelated things. And again, it is a very popular show. I'm not surprised that they're making money. And again, these are not surprising numbers. If you look at other majorly successful performing arts companies, I think their numbers are higher than this in many cases. So anyway, that's that. What is Falun Gong? Okay, this should be interesting. Falun Gong, or Falun Dafa, which is its formal name is Falun Dafa. Falun Gong is sort of a colloquial name. It means the same thing, the Buddhist-based spiritual practice from China. Falun Gong, or Falun Dafa, is a religious movement that emerged in China in the early 1990s, per CNN. Yes, that's true. According to the Freedom House reporting, at least 70 million people were practicing Falun Gong in 1999. Almost true. Most figures put it at 100 or even over 100 million. There was a Chinese government state-run media broadcast from back then that said over 100 million. So, it's a large number of people. By the way, that means back in 1999, if you look at the population of China, that means 1 out of every 13 people in the country was practicing Falun Gong at that time. That's just how popular this practice was in the 1990s, before the Chinese regime, the leaders of the Chinese regime, grew nervous about its size and its spirituality and ordered a persecution campaign that has been raging for the last 25 years. Shen Yun describes Falun Dafa on their website as a mind-body practice guided by the principles of truth, compassion, and forbearance. It is common practice for Shen Yun performers to meditate backstage before a show, specifically drawing inspiration from Falun Dafa's teachings, discipline, and guidance per the group's website. All that's very true. In fact, I think that's what makes the Shen Yun performance so moving, is that when the performers are on stage, they really believe in the principles they're conveying. Principles of like compassion and resilience. These are something they try and live by. So when they get on stage and do a performance about it, it's quite moving. It's very genuine. For our performers, practicing Falun Dafa is more than just meditation, the site reads. It's a state of mind that guides daily life, oriented toward self-betterment, taking responsibility, and putting others first. Well said. All true. Okay, why is Shen Yun not allowed to perform in China? Let's see how they did in this area. Despite advertising itself as a celebration of Chinese culture, Shen Yun is not allowed to perform in China due to its association with Falun Gong, which is also anti-communist, per AP News. All right, that's a very sort of shallow way of putting it. I'm sorry to the author, but it is. First of all, despite advertising itself as a celebration of Chinese culture, it's not allowed to perform in China. So one of the reasons it can't perform in China is because it's showing the world authentic Chinese culture, how beautiful and spiritual it was before the communist regime took power and almost destroyed it. That's one of the reasons they cannot perform in China. The communist regime doesn't want people to see that. But then it talks about Falun Gong as anti-communist. Falun Gong is a Buddhist-based spiritual practice. In the 1990s, when it was popular, people were just meditating in the parks, and they weren't anti-communist or anti-anything. It was the Chinese regime that took aim on Falun Gong and the 100 million people that were practicing it and unleashed a horrific persecution where detention is rampant, torture is rampant, death by torture, death by organ extraction is rampant. It was only then that Falun Gong stood up and said, this is wrong. These are my beliefs. There's nothing wrong with it. It's very healthy. I'm going to peacefully defy this. If you call that anti-communist, that seems like a gross oversimplification of Falun Gong's stance on things. Okay. As detailed on the dance group's website, Shen Yun makes various references to Dafa throughout the shows, including a dance that tells the story of China's persecution of those who practice it. Okay, all that's true. The show has about 20 segments, and again, as I said, it's sort of a showcase of Chinese history and culture. You see different dynasties, different religious beliefs, different great works of literature, but you do see a couple pieces on modern China and the tyranny of the CCP and persecuting Falun Gong and Falun Gong people and their supporters standing up to that. So that's all on stage. So that's true. According to CNN, Falun Gong was banned and suppressed from China in 1999. Yes, The Guardian reported in July 2009 that Falun Gong members have been persecuted for practicing the movement's beliefs since it was banned, with supporters outside China claiming that 2,000 people have died in custody since 1999. Okay, so that was back in 2009. That's probably true. Now that number is well over 5,000, but it's very important to understand that that is the tip of the iceberg. In order to get a case out of China of someone being tortured to death for their faith in Falun Gong, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of courage on the person doing it. People who have done this themselves have been put in prison. In some cases, tortures or killed. It's very dangerous. It's very hard to get information out of China. So the fact that we have well over 5,000 cases of people being tortured to death in China over the last 25 years, again, small tip of the iceberg. That number is certainly much, much, much larger. And again, if you look at the forced organ harvesting crimes, and I'll include a link down below that talks about this more in depth, there have been third-party tribunals that looked at that and said that upwards of 60,000 or more people were being killed each year for many years. Primarily Falun Gong people, in order to take their organs and fuel a booming organ transplant business in China. So it's been absolutely horrific. This is accurate in what it's saying, but it certainly doesn't cover the whole picture. Okay. Falun Gong practitioners are also subject to widespread surveillance, arbitrary detention, and torture per the Freedom House, which also reported that there were 933 cases of imprisonment for those exercising their right to freedom of expression and of religion between January 2013 and June 2016. I don't know those exact numbers. They sound right. But again, it looks like they're taking like little pieces of data and letting you know that where it's important to understand this has been going on for 25 years. Literally millions have been detained in some form or another. And again, rampant torture, rampant death. And so it is a bigger picture. But so far, I'm starting to like a little bit more of the research being done here. Now they're going to qualified NGOs. They're going into other places and pulling in stuff that is accurate, it looks to me, and also relevant to understand the Shen Yun story. You cannot understand the story of Shen Yun without understanding what the Falun Gong faith is, and perhaps more importantly, what's happened to the Falun Gong people over the last 25 years in China and with the transnational oppression around the world. So, so far, I think this article is getting better, and it's not a bad representation there on the section, which it said, why is Shen Yun not allowed to perform in China? Not a bad job there. Okay, what has Shen Yun been accused of? Okay, so let's dive into this. In August 2024, that's correct, the date, the New York Times published an investigation into the performing arts group, revealing that many of its performers have claimed to be working under abusive conditions for years. Okay, what they're saying here on the surface is true. Obviously, I have big problems with the allegations that the New York Times is making, riddled with inaccuracies, a lot of bias, not disclosing conflicts of interest. I mean, a horribly distorted picture of Shen Yun as I have experienced it, as my sons have experienced it. I won't go too much more into that, but again, I want to point to, I will put a link down below where I did another video where I looked at the latest New York Times article, and you can go more into depth on that. Okay. According to the outlet, performers were routinely discouraged from seeking care for injuries as Hongji pushed the message that his teachings could expel illnesses from their bodies without medical treatment. Again, go look at the video I did on the New York Times article recently. That's in the comments below. This is largely completely ridiculous. And I've seen the evidence. Two things I could say on that. First of all, not my son's experience, not the experience of the friends that they've made and the circle of friends that they have, not our experience at all. And also just objective reality. I've seen as a nonprofit group that was investigating all this, was looking at transnational press and was looking at Shen Yun, I've seen record after record after record after record of medical treatment of everything from minor issues with strains and tendonitis to major issues, knee surgery, snapped Achilles tendons, the full gamut, surgeries, rehabs, all that stuff. I've seen so many cases that just, what the way they're characterizing the culture of Shen Yun today cannot be true. If all those medical records exist, and again, from my own experience through my sons. Okay. Some performers told the outlet that when they got sick or injured, instructors led them to believe something was wrong with their spiritual state, per the outlet. Meanwhile, others danced through dislocated kneecaps and sprained ankles as a way to avoid being labeled as unfaithful to Hongzhi, who they were taught to see as a living God and creator of the universe. Okay. Again, not at all our experience. I'll point you to the New York Times, the dissection I did of the New York Times in the comments section. Please go look at that. Horribly, horribly misleading, not our experience, but I won't go into it again in this video. Okay, representatives of Shen Yun and Falun Gong denied the allegations to the outlet, claiming that performers who got hurt did not go without medical care. It's not just that we claim that. In fact, I was involved in some of the early communication in the New York Times. We actually offered, I was with a Shen Yun person, and we were sitting there, and they offered for the New York Times to interview how many dancers they wanted who had received medical treatment. They refused to do that and instead proceeded with their publishing their article as it was. That certainly would have refuted a lion's share of this whole false narrative. In a September 2024 podcast episode for the Shen Yun community, Dr. Damon Noto contested the claims, sharing that he has treated several Shen Yun dancers. That same month, CEO of Northern Medical Center, Dr. Jingduan Yang, appeared on the podcast and said the claims were ridiculous. Okay, I have some personal experience with this. Dr. Damon Noto, a well-known spine and joint doctor in New Jersey. He's also one of the best sports medicine doctors, from what I understand. He's actually the doctor that treated my younger son when he had some lower back pain and some knee pain. And so, yeah, I would encourage you to look at his podcast because he's a doctor who has personally trained many, many Shen Yun performers, and you can see what he has to say about this. But I think the last word of the paragraph sums it up fairly well. Ridiculous. Okay. In quotes, anybody who got injured or in pain will get immediate treatments because that's the only way they can heal, can recover, and return to the performance, he said, adding that his colleagues meet with at least 2 or 3 performers every month. Okay, I'm sure that's true. Dancers also alleged to the New York Times that they worked long hours for little to no pay. For example, despite performing more than 800 shows a year, some performers in their mid-20s were being paid $12,000 or less, per the New York Times. Okay, I qualify this entire paragraph is completely misleading. And again, I went into the details of why that is in the New York Times dissection I did. So go into the comments section, click on that and watch that, and you'll see that what I'm talking about there. Okay, Shen Yun representatives claim that their dancers were paid a legally allowed amount that was in keeping with industry standards. Okay, Shen Yun also noted that all students are on full scholarship, which amounts to about $50,000 a year. That is true. My boys have been on full scholarship in the academy and the college, and will graduate without a cent of debt, which I'm very grateful for. That's wonderful. So all that's true. Elsewhere in the investigation, some former Shen Yun performers detailed experiencing an atmosphere of fear, including being subjected to emotional abuse and manipulation. In response, the Falun Dafa Information Center, that's the nonprofit that I run out of New York, claimed that the New York Times investigation only told a one-sided story, contesting many of the outlets' accusations. Okay, let's see what our organization said. The Information Center also claimed there were several conflicts of interest among sources, specifically that at least 3 of the 6 performers quoted throughout the investigation allegedly had undisclosed ties to the Beijing Dance Academy, one of Shen Yun's major competitors. Okay, that's true, but it's not just Shen Yun's major competitor. I think that's the lesser of the two evils. Beijing Dance Academy is effectively a Chinese government-run entity. 11 of the 13 board members of that effectively run that organization are Communist Party members, some of them specializing in propaganda. This is not some benign dance academy. And so anybody connected to that, and then who was attacking Shen Yun or Falun Gong, which the Chinese regime has been trying to destroy for 25 years, represents a way more egregious problem than just a conflict of interest or a business-based conflict of interest. This is literally somebody who's tied to an evil regime going after a dissident group in cahoots. So it's a pretty big problem. I wouldn't limit that to one of Shen Yun's major competitors. Okay, in their contestation, the Information Center provided alleged email receipts that suggested Shen Yun representatives had offered to arrange interviews with performers who had sought and received medical treatment, but the outlet did not speak with them. That's all true. I have those. When they say email receipts, yeah, copies of our emails, yeah, that's true. The alleged emails further claim that there are medical records to disprove the outlet's accusations, though it believed it wasn't given an adequate amount of time to provide them. Okay, all that's true. Why was there a lawsuit against Shen Yun? Okay, so anyway, let me just recap. Again, fairly impressive, especially given the start. Certainly they're citing all this stuff from the New York Times. I understand why they feel they need to do that, but then they're going to some real sources. They're going to actual medical doctors who have actually trained Shen Yun performers. They're going to some of the research that the Falun Dafa Information Center did. They're going to some of the available information, such as students are on full scholarship. They're pulling this all together. And I'll have to say, I know I kind of made a joke at the beginning of People magazine, but so far they're doing a much more thorough job of understanding what's really going on with Shen Yun than the New York Times. Why was there a lawsuit against Shen Yun? Okay. A few months after the initial accusations from the New York Times, the outlet reported that one of the cited performers, Chang Chun-ko, filed a lawsuit against the group. She accused Shen Yun. I'm just sort of scanning ahead. So this whole section is really just pulling out some of the accusations made by this dancer against Shen Yun. Again, I covered this in the New York Times article dissection. You can go and read that. I won't rehash it here. But it looks like the author here is giving them a section to talk about the substance of the lawsuit. The next section here, what have Shen Yun performers said about their experience? While Shen Yun has faced a slew of criticism, there are several current and former performers and employees who have spoken about positive experiences from their time with the group. Several? We'll see about that. Over 1,000 current and former Shen Yun dancers, musicians, production staff, and family members signed a petition stating that they are horrified to see the gross distortions and false narratives about our work, our faith, and our way of life echoing through mainstream media. Okay, the reason I paused on several is because it's over 1,500. I don't know why they say over 1,000. I guess over 1,500 is also over 1,000, but it's over 1,500, 1,551 specifically. Current and former Shen Yun performers, as well as immediate family members, which are largely parents, are basically saying everything the New York Times is saying and these lawsuits are alleging are gross distortions of their work, their faith, and their life. That is true. That's why I balked at several. This is not several. This is an enormous amount, especially if you compare it to the number of people that are making these accusations, which, is about, if you look across the core set of people making these accusations in the New York Times or in the lawsuits, I think it's less than 10. It's somewhere in that area. So stack that number against over 1,500 that say this. I think that's a little bit more than several. Okay. Many of those who signed are also commented on the positive impact Shen Yun has had on them. Shen Yun is a gift and a blessing in my life, one signer wrote. In September 2024, former Shen Yun employee Mingye Liu wrote an op-ed in Newsweek outlining her positive, it's a man, his positive experience with the company, saying that she felt proud to be a part of it. Okay, so if you click on that Newsweek article, I think there's a picture of him. Oh, there isn't. Oh, there is. Okay, so I don't know. Maybe I'm not sure what they missed there, but that's a man, not a woman. But hey, look at what this reporter did. Not only did he or she quote the petition, but had a link to it and actually went into the petition. I'll go into it now. Let's click on this petition link. And if you go in, you see what the petition's about and what they're saying. But at the bottom, they also give you excerpts about, some of the performers were very hurt by what the New York Times was saying. And so not only did they sign a petition, but they kind of wrote a little testimony or just what their feelings were. This reporter for People.com actually did enough due diligence to read through these excerpts and really see what the performers are actually saying. So again, kudos for doing that. And that's the end of the article. Okay. I stand corrected. People magazine, the institution that brings you Sexiest Man Alive and whatever's going on with the Royals or Taylor Swift's latest boyfriend, those guys gave you a more nuanced, complete, and balanced view of what is going on with Shen Yun than the New York Times, and it's not even close. It's not a perfect article. I took exception with some of the stuff they were saying. It's clearly not in line with our experience, the experience of my sons and our family and so many of the people I know at Shen Yun, but they did some research about trying to understand what is the Falun Gong factor here? What is the persecution factor? How does that drive or be part of the artistic drive of Shen Yun? And kudos for them for doing that. Much better than I thought. Okay, that's it. I hope that was informative, interesting. See you next time.